Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. Oh, what time of week is it, if you do not know? Well, it is that time of the week where we come onto the airwaves and dig underneath all of the bougie propaganda, dig up those hard truths that the corporate media do not want you to know about, and call out the establishment on their BS. That is right. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. That's right, your only source for political revolution. I want to thank y'all for tuning in this week. I know it's the holiday weekend for a lot of the students out there. Of course, you know, it's that particular holiday based on genocide and oppression. Sorry. Yes, as we all know, and actually that's why I'm playing A Tribe Called Red. A lot of mixed feelings as far as Thanksgiving goes. I myself am going to be spending some time with my family tomorrow, but certainly not without at the forefront of my mind the knowledge that Thanksgiving, if you don't really know the history of it, is primarily kind of this propagandistic thing. It was officially recognized and cemented as a holiday by Abraham Lincoln to more or less whitewash the history of the natives. There were Thanksgiving celebrations, but it's not in the kind of cartoonish cookie-cutter manner that we're taught as children, where, you know, like, these poor white people, they don't have any food, so the native folks are just going to be real nice and have a bunch of cartoon smiles on their faces and bring them corn and turkey and yada yada. And there was some bad stuff that happened in between, but there was at least that nice little meal. Thanksgiving traditionally was, and the genesis of it was kind of the victory feast that the white colonizers would have after they would rape, pillage, and burn an Indian village or town or encampments. Yeah, but think about that when y'all are eating your stuffing and your turkey tomorrow. And we're going to be touching on this topic again in the program. This is the anniversary of the night on the 1806 bridge just passed. For those of you who don't know, when I say the night on the 1806 bridge, I'm talking about November 20th / 21st, because it lasted deep into the night, even into the dawn of the next day. That was when the water protectors at Standing Rock, including yours truly, had that famous standoff with the police. That was kind of our, dogs in Birmingham moment. Well, actually, there was a dogs at Standing Rock moment too, but the water cannons that we were attacked with that night have become very iconic. I would imagine, at least we get the right people writing the history books, that is going to be iconic and right up there with the voting struggle on the bridge down in Birmingham when they marched and were attacked by police. Yeah, American history is very cyclical. It really loops back around. So we're going to be talking about that and how it ties into some local issues. There was a big turnout at Monday night's City Commission meeting. They were talking about the Fountain of the Pioneers, which, if you've been to Bronson Park, and maybe you've never really noticed it, or you don't really understand what it is. It's a fountain on the eastern part of the park, the easternmost fountain. And the sculpture in the middle of it is like this kind of early 20th century Art Deco piece where there is a pioneer, as it says, Fountain of the Pioneers, holding a club over a native person in a submissive pose. That's the nice way to put it. He's got his face directly into his waist. So we'll save that for later on when we're actually talking about the fountain stuff. But there were a lot of things going on earlier this week, including there was a tax rally at Fred Upton's office tomorrow. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And also, on Monday, there was the Trans Day of Remembrance. For those of you who don't know, it's a yearly day where the community comes out and recognizes and pays tribute to transgender folks who have been murdered in the last year. And this has actually been a record year for that. I'm going to read a little bit from this article in Time Magazine. Here in 2017, killings of transgender folks hit a record high. At least 25 trans people in the United States have been homicide victims so far this year, the highest annual total on record, according to advocacy groups that have been monitoring the grim phenomenon and seeking ways to reduce the toll. The Human Rights Campaign, in a report released Friday, and this was November 17th when this was published, calculated that 102 transgender people have been killed in the U.S. over the past 5 years, including 25 this year. Its report, jointly sponsored by the Trans People of Color Coalition, has issued ahead of Monday's annual Transgender Day of Remembrance observations, commemorating the hundreds of transgender people killed worldwide each year. And another monitoring group, the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, has tallied 26 homicides of trans and gender nonconforming folks in the U.S. this year. Their killings were committed by lovers, acquaintances, family members, neighbors, and strangers, the report said. While every story highlighted in this report is unique and tragic, they also reflect a legacy of intolerance, hate, and discrimination that transgender people must navigate and surmount every day. And that being said, I want to play some comments. So I went to the vigil that they were having at Bronson Park on Monday night, and I wanted to play some audio from that. There were a couple very powerful speakers. So coming up first is Sarah Rogers, and she's speaking about a program that she runs here in the community.
Everybody hear me? I'm very quiet, I've been told. As Jay said, I am the director for Out Proud Safe, which is Kalamazoo's LGBTQ homeless youth program here. And the reason I have that position is because 40% of all youth identify as LGBTQ simply because they came out. Now, there are a lot of hurdles when you're dealing with a homeless population, and it becomes exponentially more difficult when you're talking about trans people. There are spaces for so many people in this city. But for a trans individual who can be denied housing or a place to stay, even at a shelter, simply for who they are, this just kind of has to stop. It's unacceptable. It just is. I mean, it breaks my heart. I'm working with 17-year-old kids who have nowhere to go because they came out and said, you know what, I'm going to live as my authentic self, and now I have no supports. I have none. Nowhere to go. No one to turn to. I can't get a job. I can't stay in a shelter. I can't find anything I need anywhere. And it really comes down to having allies. And that's the person I want to talk about. I know we're here to honor trans people, but we can't do anything without our allies. Without allies standing up for us, standing next to us, arm in arm, celebrating who we are, not loving us in spite of who we are, but celebrating it with us. Those are the people that are making all the difference in our lives and in the lives of the people that I work with. So when you start piling on all these different intersectionalities between race, socioeconomic background, your trans identity, you start really, really layering different oppressions on a person. And we really need to do a much better job as a community to start looking at those things, paying attention, that it's not just one thing or another thing, that we are all different, and that we have multiple differences, and that's what makes us who we are. I didn't really have anything planned, so I'm sorry if it seemed a little scatterbrained, but yeah, so I thank you all for coming out today, and I love looking around and seeing this is the community that I get to belong to, and these are the people that I can rely on. These are safe spaces for me to go to when I look and see these faces, so thank you for that.
Again, that was Sarah Rogers speaking out about a local program that she runs to help local trans folks, young people who are homeless and who do not consistently have a place to live or stay at. So let's play. This is another speaker from that rally. I don't have their last name, but they go by Christina. And she had some very powerful things to say about Trans Day of Remembrance and an incident recently in Detroit.
I always talk about one person. A teetering man. I always talk about one person. Her name is Shelly. Shelly died in 2011. She was dismembered and her body was scattered across Detroit, Michigan. They made a movie about it. The police got the facts wrong. The media got the facts wrong. They told the story of a girl who was an informant. That's not the case. She was killed because of how she identified. She was killed because of who she was. And that is why every time I do a Tito event, I always start and talk about Shelly and how much she meant to me and how much I loved her. Because she was a bright, sunshiny woman who was taken way too soon. This past weekend, on Friday, a girl was shot and robbed in Detroit on Woodward. The girl's okay, but the media pronounced her dead name. They did not give her girl's name. They gave her dead name, a name that she hasn't went by for 20 years. I said that to say that today, the media, in combination with our law enforcement, does not support the trans community. And that's where we need to start. We need to have a wider view of the trans community that is more accepted. And the fact that the media cannot pronounce these women properly is problematic. The fact that police are disclosing these women's dead names is problematic. These women should be respected accordingly. When I lived in Palmer Park in Detroit, a predominantly gay neighborhood, I was harassed on an everyday basis on people outside of the neighborhood. I was called all types of scandalous slurs that I did not answer to. Yet I still continue to stay strong and push forward. This is why today I tell you all, Christina Edwards is pushing for a program, under Outfront so that I can offer program and resources to the trans community. I'm talking about support services, a focus group. We had a young lady who just spoke about housing. I think that's a very big thing about the trans community, homelessness. I would like to provide the services to the community that is not there. So, if you are with me, meet me, and we can stand together and make a change in the community. Thank you.
Hello again. Yes. So those were some speakers from the Trans Day of Remembrance. And again, last couple days have been very uptick in activity for local activism, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Tuesday night. We saw there is a tax rally at Fred Upton's office, and I wanted to play a clip from that real quick and then talk a little bit more about the actual tax theft. Really, it is stealing resources from the poorest in our country and giving a big bailout to the top 1%, as usual. As per usual, really. So let me find the place in this clip here. Okay, there we go. All right, hold on just a sec. All right, so if you don't know, there's a lot in this tax cut bill that's just absolutely atrocious, and what it'll essentially do is it is going to cut taxes for everybody making $75,000 or more a year, and for the rest of us, it's actually going to increase our taxes. And there is a chance that it may get shot down in a similar fashion to the healthcare bill, because people actually are paying attention to it, and there's actually been some Republican Congress people saying, like, this is going to hurt, middle class Republican constituents, and in code, this is going to kill our careers if we actually vote on this and people pay enough attention to it, and they are, you can see that with a number of issues. I see net neutrality all over the internet. That's a different topic we're going to discuss later on, but in general, across the political spectrum, you see people are paying attention to what our Congress is doing, and even if they aren't, this is something they're going to see on their tax bill. You can't hide this. Being this brazen is dangerous, even to people who are on like the oligarchs' agenda 100%. Doing something this brazen is just bad politics, and really opens up a path for people who want to do more progressive taxation. So let's go ahead, and this is a speaker from that rally. This is Eponine Garrett. Running for Congress right now. She's one of the organizers of the rally. So this is what she had to say at the Tax Day rally in front of Fred Upton's office.
Pretty quick here. My husband's like, no, you won't get along with it. All right, so all you folks, my name is Eponine Garrett. Eponine is what you will see on the ballot in 2018. But my friends here can call me Effie. Thank you. Fred Upton is a name that I wasn't necessarily familiar with when I first moved to Kalamazoo, but boy, he made it real fast for me to learn it. He does not mess around with making our lives miserable. He is really, really good at being deceitful. And that is not a quality that I look for in a representative. That is not a quality for somebody that is supposed to be a civil servant. Somebody servicing the public. Somebody who's supposed to take my voice to some place that my voice is not being heard. He is not doing that. Is he doing that for
Okay.
any of you?
All right, hold on. I think this video is kind of
He's
cutting
not.
in
That's
and
why we are
out.
out here on a cold November day to protest his vote.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and kill that. Although she goes on to talk about, essentially hitting on the points that I just did, where. This is a brazen cash grab from the people who need this money the most to people who are already, are already flush with cash. I'm going to say, so there's actually this really good article in The Intercept that illustrates just how hypocritical this tax bill is. And it talks specifically about Orrin Hatch. One of the more well-known kind of establishment conservatives in Congress right now. And one of the reasons they brought him up specifically is they were talking about the tax bill on the floor, and Hatch responded to Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, and he said, "I come from poor people, and I've been here working my whole entire stinking career for people who don't have a chance, and I really resent anyone saying that I'm doing this just for the rich." So here's how the article goes on to basically debunk Hatch's story. So it says Hatch went to the University of Pittsburgh Law School on a scholarship when tuition there ranged from $1,100 to $1,300 a year. The bottom tax rate in 1960 was 20%, which would have put Hatch's tax bill at around $780 for the waiver. Had Hatch been required to pay that additional $780, he may never have made it through law school unless he had saved up a true fortune during his time as a janitor paying his way through Brigham Young University. Because of inflation, the school's $1,300 tuition translates to roughly $11,000 today in what is called purchasing power, but it no longer has the power to purchase the same thing. The law school's tuition is now listed at $38,500. If the school forgives any of that, the tax man could come for the student. And if the final GOP bill attempts to distinguish between honor scholarships and other types, schools are likely to simply rename all of them, meaning Republicans will either have to tax all waivers or none. Higher tuition rates mean greater student loans, something Hatch didn't have to worry about as he went about starting his career. The House bill, meanwhile, also does away with the ability to deduct student loan interest payments from federal taxes. So, yeah, it tears into the bill as... Because, the way they're selling it is so outrageously false. I mean, even more so than usual. And what they're trying to sell is that, this is going to help the middle class. It's going to be a tax cut. And what they aren't telling people, or hoping that they won't figure out, really, is that cumulatively all of these new taxes that are going to be fielded on the lower class people under 70 who make under 75 grand a year are going to add up so that you are going to be paying more than you were before this tax bill went through. And the ones who are actually going to be getting the benefits of this tax bill unscathed are going to be people who are at the very top of the income bracket in the United States. So, and here's the thing, this is nothing new. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, where you had the Reaganomics line during the 80s that you relieve tax burdens on the richest and the wealthiest, the top 1%, and somehow that's going to trickle down, and they're going to reinvest. There's footage of this is actually at a recent summit. You can find this video at the Wall Street Journal, and they talk about there's these people who are like Wall Street investors and corporate CEOs, and they were just saying we're likely not going to reinvest this in that way. We're going to reinvest in capital and stocks. And other things that in no way help the average American worker. We saw it with the Bush tax cuts, where, okay, well, give families an extra couple $100 a year, and give the majority of the tax cuts to the wealthiest individuals. Tax cuts that, by the way, Obama continued through his administration. Well, you know what happened through those 16 years? We saw income and unemployment, income stagnate across the country. And while our overall economy bounced back, chiefly because of the gains made at the very top, people were losing money. Their quality of life was decreasing or stagnating. And then we ended up getting Trump. Gee, I wonder why. And even more locally, look at what's going on with the Foundation for Excellence. The first thing that they did was enact this property tax cut. Now, if you own a home, you're probably pretty excited about that. They even put that out in their mailers. What are you gonna do with your extra couple $100 a year? Oh boy. But I guess you could buy a TV or maybe fix your car if you own a cheap piece of property. If you're a working class fellow or whatever, you have enough to like get some new clothes or again get that car fixed. And what that really means is that the richest people in this town get out of paying the originally proposed income tax, which would have made them pay their fair share of taxes to reinvest into the neighborhood and the city's infrastructure in a way that is not self-serving, in a way that they cannot just project as like, it's philanthropic Reaganomics. That's what the Foundation for Excellence is. At least that's what it has started as. So don't be fooled about that. And that's what the Republicans are trying to shove down our throats in Congress and the House of Representatives right now. Hopefully it'll go the way of the health care bill. I'd say like people really stop that by mobilizing and calling their congressmen and senators. And I think we could probably do the same thing with this one. Make it very clear. Yeah, there's enough people who get what you're trying to do. And there's enough people who are going to be very angry and vote you out of office. And again, this is a bipartisan issue. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. If you make less than $75,000 a year, which is the vast majority of the country, you're gonna get screwed. So yeah, there you go. That's what they're trying to do, man. So make some phone calls if you do please to do so. So we're gonna take a quick break. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. So, I really quickly wanted to touch on the net neutrality thing, and we've talked about this a lot on the show before. And the aspect of it I want to talk to is it is blowing up, on the internet. But also, I hear average folks talking about net neutrality in a way that I really have not before, and that gives me a lot of hope. So I'm going to talk about this again, but I wanted to bring some attention to a nationwide campaign going on. On December 7th, there is going to be a nationwide protest, and I'll just read from the website here. So, it talks a little bit about it, and just if you're just tuning in, you don't know what this is about, this is a really good summation. So, the Federal Communications Commission is expected to vote on its plan to kill net neutrality on December 14th. People from across the political spectrum are outraged, so we're planning to protest at Verizon retail stores across the country on December 7th, 1 week before the vote and at the peak of the busy holiday shopping season. We'll demand that our members of Congress take action to stop Verizon's puppet FCC from killing net neutrality. And if you don't know what that is, it's the basic principle that prevents big internet service providers like Verizon from charging extra fees, engaging in censorship, or controlling what we see and do on the web by throttling websites, apps, and online services. And basically what that means is, and you can see this in countries like Portugal that don't have net neutrality. They basically bundle packages. It's similar to cable, so they could say like, oh, you want social media? Well, that's a separate package. That's like $10. If you want like if they want to be able to control your access to certain websites, which is really alarming to me, especially in the amount of internet censorship we've been seeing in the last several months. Look at what's going on with the World Socialist websites, a lot of other left-leaning websites who have been either dropped by Google or have had their news headlines suppressed in search results. To give that kind of power to corporate conglomerates such as Verizon, such as Charter Communications, so on and so forth, is a very dangerous thing. Because as we've seen, look at CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, these mainstream media outlets that we complain about constantly on our show for basically either doing shoddy reporting because of their corporate influence or full-on sprouting out corporate propaganda pieces. This will only be exacerbated tremendously if they are able to shut down net neutrality. And Ajit Pai, who is the Trump administration's FCC chairman, is going after net neutrality with a zeal that we have not really seen before. Again, this is something that they have gone after under the Bush and the Obama administrations. The Obama administration stopped trying to kill net neutrality due to the onslaught of public pressure. And, one important thing to know about net neutrality is it is really bipartisan. A couple weeks ago, or months ago, I guess at this point, we talked about this and how, even people on the far right, people who like the 4chan Trump people, spreading all those frog memes, they were aghast that their guy would be trying to hurt their internet freedom. And that's a little bit of schadenfreude to anybody who thought Trump actually stands for anything. But at the same time, again, this is something everybody cares about, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. They explain a little further why they're targeting Verizon stores, and it's because Ajit Pai, he's a former lawyer for Verizon, and actually a few years ago, back in 2014, I canceled my Verizon contract because they were one of the people, or corporations that is, who are at the forefront of lobbying to kill net neutrality, and they've been doing it for years. And so that's the reason that they are focusing on Verizon stores. It'll make it very visible and apparent. This is who is trying to kill it. So, again, if you're interested, VerizonProtest.com. I don't think anybody has organized one yet in Kalamazoo, but that might change. Wink, wink. Yep. And also, similar to a lot of other tactics like the healthcare and the tax bill, call your representatives, and start raising a ruckus about this, because we cannot let this stand. We really cannot. So you want to save net neutrality? There's some stuff going on, and some nearby places where they've already got rallies set up. South Bend, a couple different stores in Chicago. There's one in East Lansing, and a couple in Detroit. So, we'll keep you posted as this continues. But December 7th, mark your calendar. If you want to get out there in the streets, defend net neutrality, there will be just such an opportunity to do that. So let's keep excuse me. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a quick little break so I can. I was having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to pull up the next article, and then we will continue the discussion. Keep your dial locked. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. So, wanted to talk a little bit about the revelations from last week about Julian Assange, or I guess I should say WikiLeaks' personal communications with Donald Trump Jr. Now, at first, any story that comes out against WikiLeaks, I have an innate skepticism about. Obviously, I think anybody who's a real critical thinker, you've got to understand this is a news agency that has pissed off just about every powerful government individual on the planet. So I always kind of look at these stories when they come out in the mainstream media that are trying to paint WikiLeaks or Julian Assange in a bad light with a great degree of skepticism. That said, there's some important things to discuss from this, particularly like the communication itself, and also, there's been some misinformation coming out from it as well that's important to debunk. I wanted to talk a little bit. So there's that skit on SNL last week, and by the way, SNL, since Trump got in office, has mostly been batting 1,000. But I did want to clarify, and this is something we talk about on the show quite a lot. The idea that the DNC, the leaks from the DNC, were somehow facilitated by Russia, that has been the evidence for that points strongly in the other way. Intelligence Veterans for Sanity, which is a research group of former CIA, NSA, FBI analysts, and computer experts, looked at the data breach at the DNC and said it logically it must have been a leak and not a hack. The internet speeds the speeds of data transfer would be impossible from that server here in the United States to one in Russia, and actually matched up with the typical speeds one would find in transferring data from a computer to a USB stick. So again, we don't know exactly who got that information, but scientifically speaking, it is far more likely and virtually impossible that it was a transcontinental hack, and far more probable that it was an on-site leak. So let's talk a little bit more then about Assange himself. And at this point, I think people, and this is something I've actually been critical about myself with WikiLeaks, is, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are not one and the same. He is probably he's their most famous figurehead, but he is not the news organization. And honestly, after some of these revelations, I really think WikiLeaks needs to step back and not necessarily follow Assange's agenda, because, the way people have defended this, been like, oh, well, WikiLeaks is like this opposition kind of research organization, and that's not the thing about WikiLeaks that I like. What I like is they seek out the truth and publish it. Now, granted, there's been a lot of discussion about like objectivity in news reporting, and how like there's, especially like there's been too much of a focus on that. Like, you're not supposed to give an equal platform to, say, a climate change scientist and a climate denier, or a social justice advocate and an alt-right Nazi. Those are false equivalencies. You shouldn't do that. But when you are using the power of your information and your platform to do this kind of, four-dimensional chess that Assange and or WikiLeaks was doing, I personally don't think that's right. And if you look at what he was trying to do, one, trying to manipulate the tax returns out of Beavis and Butthead, or AKA Donald Trump Jr. Well, he would be Butthead, and his little brother would be Beavis. That's actually pretty savvy. And to be frank, that's what a leak organization does, is if you have an in with a really powerful person like that, you milk them and you manipulate them. Where the problem comes in with me is, as we can see from this, and the kind of friendly attitude they talk about, and from what WikiLeaks has been saying, it seems like they did have this kind of agenda to help out the Trump campaign, expensive Clinton. And I know, like, Assange has come out, he had that famous quote during the election that, like, who do you prefer, Trump or Clinton? And, he famously said, like, do I want cholera or, what was it, measles? Two comparably bad diseases, which kind of echoed my sentiments during the election myself. At the same time, it definitely seems that Assange was using WikiLeaks, using his platform to punch down Clinton and manipulate the Trumps, make the Trumps think that he was on their side, particularly like goading the Trumps to question the legitimacy of the election, which, our elections in the United States are not legitimate, and they're rife with election fraud and mismanagement and all that. But to a personality like Trump, what has that done? That he's harped on that since he got in. He elevated somebody like Chris Kobach to power, who, by the way, is the one who really colluded to hijack the election and make sure that Trump and a bunch of other Republican candidates won by suppressing thousands of non-white votes, communities of color. So, yeah, these things have an impact. And, the article from The Intercept goes on into it a little bit more depth, but it reminds me a lot of people who would argue during the follow-up to the election that, like, hey, it might be a little bit better if Trump won, because he would ignite, a resistance movement. Granted, that has happened, but does that mean you're going to try to help Trump win, or you're going to, like, vote for him, or you're going to do what Assange did and, think like, oh, I'm going to kind of manipulate these people and move these chess pieces around, and, it'll be good in the long run. And there's a difference between taking the situation on the ground and using it to facilitate engagement, which is what the activist movements across the country have been doing since Trump got in, and actively uplifting him so that you can accelerate the dismantling of the deep states and the establishment. Sorry, no, I don't think that was WikiLeaks or Julian Assange's place. I really don't. He's Australian, and while I appreciate all the information that WikiLeaks dropped during the election, and particularly, like, the Vault 7 leak about CIA spying practices and NSA spying practices, was one of the greatest bits of journalism and exposés that were dropped this year. But I don't want their reputation, which is solid, and they have not, reported a false story. But if they're going to be getting into this whole kind of like manipulation of elections game, the Intercept article cites some, like, dubious tweets that WikiLeaks and Julian Assange were making aimed at the Hillary Clinton campaign. Again, we need organizations like WikiLeaks to help us expose the rotten truth of people and organizations in power, the evil folks who run the world. But if we let, kind of the orthodoxy that Assange has been on lately dominate who WikiLeaks is as an organization, we could lose them. We really could. Because regardless of whether you think, Assange made the right move, to use their resources as a truth-telling platform to manipulate power brokers in such a way that are harmful to average people, that's unacceptable. And furthermore, I think WikiLeaks as an organization needs to distance itself a little bit from Assange, and also people in general. Look, Assange has done some great things. He has done some heroic things, but as we have been learning over the last several months, your heroes can do some pretty horrible stuff. And outside of even the leak stuff, there are the rape allegations against Assange. Those have since been debunked, but the women who have accused him of sexual, they walked it back. They said they were kind of pushed to exacerbate it into something tantamount to sexual assault. But the original allegation was that basically they had sex with Julian Assange. He gave them an STD and then never contacted them again. And that might not be on a gradating scale. That may not be as bad as rape, but that's still an a-hole thing to do. No to hero worship. I'll criticize Assange. I'll criticize Bernie Sanders. I'll criticize any of those golden calves if I think they're acting a fool. And personally, I think, again, a lot of respect for what Assange does and deep, profound respect for what WikiLeaks does. But give us the information and we'll work with it. And please do not play around with people's lives like that. Really did not like that. It left a very bad taste in my mouth. So, we're going to be pivoting into a different topic. I wanted to play a clip. As I mentioned earlier, Monday was the anniversary of that night on the 1806 bridge, and I want to play a clip. This is actually from our broadcast on December 28th, 2016, after I returned from Standing Rock, and I spoke about that night. So I'm going to play that, and we'll come back. We're going to talk more about Native issues in general, the Fountain of the Pioneers, Standing Rock, and more. November 20th, that was the night of the police confrontation on the 1806 bridge. That, a lot of famous footage and photos on the internet. That was the night where the Morton County police were using water cannons, rubber bullets, tear gas on the water protectors. Special note, that is a very huge distinction. That's part of the culture of the camp and the ethos of the pipeline struggle in general. Protectors, not protesters. And that's very important. It's about defending the land from this incursion, from this oil pipeline. It's not just pardon me. It's a very important philosophic distinction, so it's not just semantics. That is part of the whole ethos of both the camp and the pipeline struggle. But anyway, November 20th, that was the night that they used the water cannons. Now, this is my second night in camp. I'll kind of tell you my perspective of going onto the bridge that night, 1806 bridge. I was at the Sacred Fire, and I was still kind of getting my bearings around the camp. Sacred Fire is kind of this communal convening area. People would swap information there. People would perform ceremony there as a community. Also, some very humor. The announcer, who had a very keen sense of humor. I hate to sidetrack so much, but yeah, that announcer, he was a great guy. And, okay, I'll touch on that later. Let's get to the bridge. Sorry, folks. Still getting used to being on the radio again, and my mind shouldn't wander hither and thither. So the call came out. There were some people performing an action down by the bridge. What exactly that action was, I'm still not entirely sure. Except, it was... They were going to the line. What there was a barricade at the end of 1806. By the way, a bit of an update on that. Since then, what it was, they were trying to remove some burnt-out vehicles that were on the bridge that the police had basically put there. So, all right, I'm sorry. More back to me from about a year ago. This bridge across the river, which, by the way, the legality of that barricade actually being there is in question. But the call came out that, we need to get our people out of there. We need to come support them. So many people in the camp rushed down to the barricade at the 1806 bridge. I was told by some of the people who had been there a lot longer than I had, hey, it's your second night here. Maybe you shouldn't go to the front lines right away. And I thought about that for about 2 seconds, and then I grabbed my goggles and earplugs and rushed down there. That ended up being over a 6-hour standoff. Actually, a lot longer because while the main confrontation had ended, people were down there and through the next morning. And what really shocked me about this, the use of water cannons. And it was about 20 degrees that night. Water cannons in 20-degree weather. Now, their main argument, and by they being the Morgan County Sheriff's Department, their main argument for defending their actions is that they're using less than lethal force, that they're using non-lethal weapons when they are fighting these supposedly agitating demonstrators who, and we'll get onto that point a little bit later. Just to know, though, the whole approach of the No DAPL protectors, water protectors, is out of ceremony and prayer, and it's deliberately and strategically not engage in violence with the police. So anytime you hear of a story that there's violence being incurred against the police, it's hogwash. Typically, absolute hogwash. I will note that on that night at the bridge, I did see a few water bottles flung past the police line. I believe one of them actually hit the water cannon. But let's unpack that real quick for anybody who would say, oh, hey, I told you so. Those water bottles that I saw thrown were only after several hours of people being doused with water cannons and sub-freezing temperatures. People were absolutely upset. And some people lost their composure through those water bottles. So it would be disingenuous of me to say that there was no confrontation with the police. But I think it would be completely fair for me to say that it was complete, unequivocal force used against the protectors. And the narrative that they used to defend using those cannons and using that equipment is absolutely ridiculous. What they went on to argue is that they used the water cannons as like a firefighting tool. As somebody who was on the front lines that night, who actually saw this go down, those were not firefighting water cannons. Those were specifically the sort of water cannons that are used by riot police. And yes, they were all very much dressed like riot police that night, and the whole RoboCop thing, head to toe. And they said they were putting out fires that us water protectors were deliberately starting. Now, there were fires started on the other side of the bridge in order to warm up the people who had been doused with the water cannons in order to warm them up. Big point being there, we were trying to, we were trying to prevent them from dying of hypothermia. And that's the really ridiculous thing. I talk about less than lethal force. If you spray someone with pressurized water, like, fire hose intensity in sub-freezing weather, that is not less than lethal. I believe at least there are several dozen of the protectors had to go to the hospital. Medics were just busy and ravaged all night. I had one of the people I drove in to North Dakota with, they were on as a medic, and they were absolutely wiped out for the next several days because that was a very hectic night. In addition to the water cannons, yes, they were also using rubber bullets. They were also using tear gas. While I was down on the bridge, I didn't hear them use the sound cannons at all. I can't remember off the top of my head if they eventually used them or not, but that is something they have used in past interactions with the water protectors. I myself, to be completely frank, I did not get close enough to the cannons to get sprayed with the water. I was not properly equipped for that sort of thing, which is really unfortunate because I had a poncho in the tent. But the people at the front, generally, they were using shields, and when I say shields, I mean like a lot of makeshift stuff, like Rubbermaid lids and that sort of thing. However, I was close enough to get hit with a tear gas grenade. It bounced right off my shoulder, and for those of you who've never been hit with one, it kind of smarts. And for those of you who've never inhaled tear gas, the best analogy I can come up with is it's kind of like smoking an entire carton of cigarettes all at once. Your throat just burns. Oh, ugh. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is extremely uncomfortable and disorienting. And they were very liberal with the tear gas that night. Several volleys, several rounds shot into the crowd. Most egregiously, and I didn't know this woman, but I made friends at camp with people who knew this woman, Sophia. Her arm was hit directly with a concussion grenade. Concussion grenades, basically, they make a small explosion, more meant to disorient people than actually hurt them. But you're not supposed to detonate one point blank. And you can look this up on the internet. There's pictures widely available of this. Her arm was almost blown off. And it's extremely graphic, but you can Google this. You can find this. You can find pictures of the woman's arm, and it is absolutely disgusting. It's torn to shreds. You meat and bone on the entire forearm, and she had to have a very intense operation in order to save her arm. For a long time, we thought it wasn't going to get saved. They were able to remove some skin from, I believe, her back and thighs in order to get fixed. But yeah, that was the height of the violence that night, delivered upon us by the military-industrial complex. They almost blew a woman's arm off, and they blew a huge chunk of it off. And I certainly don't want to complain about taking a little tear gas in light of that. The brutality of the police there was staggering in a way that I had never really seen before. And the Hoodrat Strategist, I've spent a great deal of my life studying injustice, and it wasn't my first rodeo as far as like being in the front lines at a police line, meeting police in riot gear. But the overall tone of that evening was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and what immediately popped to my mind was that it wasn't a protest in the traditional sense that I had ever experienced. It felt far more like these people were having war waged against them. That is what it felt like being down there. It was a battle Of course, it was a very one-sided battle because none of the water protectors, by virtue of our own strategy, we don't have any weapons. And so our weapon becomes public pressure and recognition. And I want to thank everybody who saw what happened that night, shared it on Facebook, or talked about it to your friends, because that is how we turn that against them. That is strategic activist jujitsu right there. You take your opponent's strengths and you turn it into weaknesses. And so by them coming down so hard on the crowd there, who was not trying to pass the police line, who was assembling peacefully, it sheds light on just how egregious the injustice is out there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to have a special guest joining us to discuss the fountain and other pertinent issues as we're going into everyone's favorite genocidal feast holiday tomorrow. So keep your dial locked. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is Hoodrat Strategist radio program. So I want to introduce Eugene Strong. He was out there with us on Monday night at the City Commission meeting to help speak out about the Fountain of the Pioneers. And we've talked about this on the show many times before, but before we get into that, just Eugene, would you like to kind of introduce yourself to the folks at home, maybe talk a little bit about who you are in this movement and kind of why you came out on Monday?
Yes. Chikwaza Indishnakas. Chikwaza is my name. I would like to first say, Minnie McConey, water is life.
Water is life.
Water is sacred. All living things have spirit. Water has spirit. And that's a big thing. What I'm really concerned with is spirit, the spirit of the ancestors. When we see where that fountain is, and what that fountain is, I put up a post. I had found a picture of a medieval knight, and when you see the picture of the medieval knight compared to what they're calling a pioneer who's standing over the native chief in the headdress with his sword raised, ready to chop into the native chief, well, then you realize that it's not a pioneer, because I never saw a pioneer look like a medieval knight. And that was Leonelli's depiction of what he was capturing in his art. We were told at the meeting of the city commissioners that this was Leonelli's artistic idea of how to honor, was to show the hardships of the native people as the pioneers marched westward. But we don't need art to continue to bash us, just like we're continually bashed. It's all a piece of genocide, and the thing that the city commissioners fail to address at all is the mound that's in that park. That park, in my opinion, is not a park. It's not a place of, I almost expect them to, when I look at their master plan, I expect to see like this big Ferris wheel that they're going to put in the middle. It should be like an amusement park, because it doesn't address what that site is, and it's a very sacred site. When I have spent decades working with mounds, trying to bring the mounds back. These are our burial sites. Adolf Hitler, he had done a lot of research on the native people, and that's how he was able to come up with his ideas on genocide against the Jewish people. And his very final act of genocide was to destroy the burial sites of the Jewish people, to eliminate them, to erase them from the face of the earth. And if you can erase the burial sites, that's all that's left. In our culture, we have a thing that we pray. We pray to our grandfather. Well, in the mounds, that is the resting place of our ancestors. John Trudell, he said what we're about to see is that when we're praying, it's about to be extinct. We're not going to be able to pray to our ancestors because they continue to destroy all of our burial sites. And this is genocide. This is the very final act of genocide. And these commissioners, one commissioner had spoke when all 50 people had spoke, either for or against the fountain. Then it came time for the commissioners to speak, and the second commissioner to speak had said that, well, it was Potawatomi land, but according to the history book that he had read...
Oh, and that's Commissioner Anderson, by the way, for those listening at home. Yep.
Yes. And he said that according to the book that he was reading, that other tribes have been there. The Potawatomi had brutally kicked them out, and like they had been kicked out prior to that. The whole point is just as you were saying with the water protectors at Standing Rock, the DAPL mercenaries, they had no concept of how to address the water protectors because the water protectors had no weapons per se. The weapons of choice is the weapon of love. We fight with love. We fight with peace. And they don't know how to address that. They have spent their occupation learning how to fight with war and fight with all of their militaristic weapons. But our weapons, and I don't even view them as a weapon, but our prayers, their love, their peace. And Dr. James Adovizio, he's known as the best archaeologist in the world today. And his mentor, Dr. Melvin Akins from the University of Oregon, and both of them, through all of their explorations, archaeological explorations, what they have always said is this, that through all of their explorations, they have never once found a cache of weapons. And if we were a warlike people, you would find a cache of weapons. They were not found. They've never been found because we're not warlike. The weapons they did find weren't weapons. They were tools, agriculture tools. We are the most advanced culture in the history of the world. We were masters of agriculture, masters of archaeology, masters of horticulture, masters of geometry, and masters of the cosmos. All go together. When you understand the stars and the moons and the planets, and you have to be a master of geometry to be able to understand the movements of the stars and the moon and the sun. And well, when you understand that while you're growing, you're able to produce the very best of crops. They started with blades of grass, the biggest blades of grass, and they would cultivate those. And then they would continue that until they had seed pods. And they would take those plants with the seed pods, the largest ones, and recultivate. You're talking about thousands of generations until they finally obtained popcorn. And they continued to cultivate until we have the corn that we have today. Well, not basically the corn that we have today, because Monsanto took it and destroyed it.
Don't get me started on Monsanto. Yeah. Oh man. But actually, I was wondering let's dive a little bit more into that, because that's a really so what Anderson said about there's been other tribes and there's been other he's basically making that really poor argument. And I've heard it before, this equivocation between, natives, or you also hear this about African tribes would brutalize each other, etc. But there is a very huge difference between, particularly you look at the history of tribes and the indigenous nations in North America. And, they had disputes. It was not the kind of genocidal, salt the earth tactics that, the colonial settlers used. And I was wondering maybe you could speak a little bit more to that. So, basically debunk that kind of idea that, there was warfare between tribes here. So that somehow makes the genocide that was the genesis of Kalamazoo somehow okay or more understandable.
And we're people of love. We're spiritual people. I'm with the American Indian movement. And the American Indian movement they have been in the 70s, they were regarded on the FBI's list as the number one terrorist organization in the world, which is so bizarre because we are a spiritual movement. And we have violence is the very, very last course of action. Violence is not accepted because when someone says, look, it's time to get violent, you have to stop and you have to think. And whenever your answer comes up as violence, well, then stop and think again. And you've got to continue to do that, because there are other ways. And it's prayer. It's spirituality. And that's what that mound is in Kalamazoo. It's a very spiritual place. It is a sacred site. And it needs to be protected as a sacred site. And when they have, when you go down to that park, and I sat there, I was there over the weekend, and I was just praying. I wanted to acknowledge the ancestors. I wanted to let them know that they are honored and they're respected, because after they forcibly moved the tribes out of there was no longer any ceremonies permitted to be. That was the law of the land. When the native people were conducting any ceremonies, the head of the church would be leading the police and the military, and they would go in. And if they caught you doing a ceremony, their course of action was to kill everyone, because they said they were conducting satanic rituals. They were heathen and savage, and that they could not do that. So we did this march on Monday because we wanted to honor and respect the ancestors, and let the ancestors know that we care about them. We're still here. We're still praying, and we love you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
And by the way, I felt very, very privileged to have you there and kind of helping facilitate that march. For those who don't know, before the actual city commission meeting, when we were, they were supposed to vote on the fountain, but they pushed it off 90 days. There was a march around the mound, and then we all stood around it and gave our respects. I was very glad to have you there to kind of give some historical context to it, and also really bring home, Bronson Park. It is not the kind of neutral ground that I think a lot of these nice white liberals painted it as. They're as you said, this is the resting site for many indigenous people, and kind of adds insult to injury to have a sculpture like that there. So I wanted to kind of pivot towards, so we mentioned there were about 25 for, 25 against, and there was a generally consistent pattern with the people who were for the statue. And it was all about, using, the statue as an educational tool. It was a lot of, I was shouting during citizens' comments, a parade of nice white liberals. Their perspectives seem to be completely entrenched in this idea that we need the statue there for educational purposes. Now, I want to apologize first and foremost that there are apparently so many, ignorant people in my city who would insult you and the other native folks there to have such a preposterous argument. But I wanted to kind of ask you, what in the face of this kind of I compared it to like defending a sports team slur, but with a liberal arts degree. But what was your sense when you were there, like hearing all these people talk about like the importance of art as a historical tool when it's also just a blatant symbol of oppression?
Well, what we should possibly do is show pictures of the Dakota 38. When they took the 38 chiefs and hung them at Fort Snelling. That was authorized by Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln said that they wanted to, I guess, hang 130 some, but they took it down to 38. But still, they hung at the same time 38 plus 2, and that was even to date the largest mass execution by the government at one time. And so we should maybe put up a picture of that and say, hey, maybe this is a learning tool. Maybe we should show Thanksgiving tomorrow, show the true history of Thanksgiving, which they're saying that they're not allowed to be teaching in schools. But you don't teach truth. You're going to teach about Pocahontas and Disney's version. The true meaning of Thanksgiving. What happened was, the settlers of their little colonies would run to the neighboring tribe. They would go in, they would kill everybody, massacre the entire tribe, and take all their supplies that they had for the winter and take them back to the colony. And then they would have a day where they would say, oh, this is Thanksgiving. They would do that every week, every month, every year, until Abraham Lincoln finally said, well, this is too much. Maybe we should just do it once a year. So that's what they do. Once a year, they celebrate Thanksgiving, the time where the colonists run and they murder all the natives of the neighboring tribe and take all of their bounties, and they have a great feast. Thanksgiving to me is an absolute atrocity. But I want to mention this one other thing. When you look at an oversized view, overhead view of the park, and you see around it are churches. I think there's about 6 churches. But what I've found was that the church has a responsibility. Whether it's the Catholic, whether it's the Protestant, the Baptist, the Christian church has a responsibility. They have a responsibility to all living souls, and they also have the same responsibility for all dead souls. And so they have done nothing to acknowledge or to help the ancestors in that mound. And people will say that, the grave robbers took everything from that mound. There's no longer any remains in that mound, and there's no longer any funerary objects in that mound. But the fact still remains, the spirits of those ancestors are there, and that's what we felt when we marched on Monday night. The spirits of the ancestors are still there, and we acknowledge them, and they're very thankful to all of us for finally saying, hey, we love you. And that's what I say to everyone listening to this, is I love all of you.
Oh, thank you, Eugene, and much love out there too. So we see this. One of the things that really brought this back out into the open was what happened in Charlottesville, and we started kind of gaining some steam again. Like this has been an issue that people in Kalamazoo have been bringing up for decades. Do you feel that I've talked to other indigenous organizers on the show before, and with everything that's happened in the past year, Standing Rock, kind of a greater realization that, white supremacy is alive and well in this country by a lot of, white people who maybe didn't really pay as much attention as they should have. Do you feel there is kind of a path forward, that there is a sort of spiritual awakening towards restitution that maybe wasn't there before these last few years of intense resistance?
The ones in Charlottesville, if you're familiar with the white supremacists, if you're familiar with the Ku Klux Klan, if you're familiar with even the Christians, because, let's face it, let's look at the Crusades, what happened there. So this has been going on for thousands of years.
Crusades are kind of like a practice run for what happened in America, really, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
1,000 years ago, we were 300 million people here. We were the largest majority. And today, After World War II, there were 56,000 Native people. This was the largest case of genocide in the history of the world. But we are still here. We remain. We're the smallest minority, but our faith has us extremely powerful. But our faith is love. Our power is love. And I don't want to sound like what you might think as a flower child or something. I'm telling you how I see the way that I've been taught. And my teachings say that more than anything, we are love. Our seven grandfather teachings, grandfather love. That's how we walk. And when we can walk in that good way, then we have nothing to fear, and we have nothing to be ashamed of. We have nothing to worry about, because we have the faith of love.
And, and forgive me if I'm going to wax a little philosophic, but, I've been thinking about, Standing Rock a lot in the last, few days, weeks. People ask me how I feel about it, in the, look in the rear view mirror, the Dakota Access Pipeline ended up getting approved. The camp did not last forever, and I've actually had people ask me, like, well, was it just a waste of time, you going out there? And what I always tell people is, what Standing Rock was for me and for, I think, the thousands of other people that came there, it was this broad spiritual awakening, something that can't really be taken back. And it was this flashpoint that I think is going to bring us closer to that kind of revolution of love and mutual understanding that humankind has really been lacking, especially how we've become, positively we've become this global community, but it's been under the foot of white colonialism and that sort of greed. Sorry, kind of went all over the place with that one, but in light of that, I do. Let's kind of ground it again. Unless, I don't know if you had anything to comment off of that.
Well, I continue to. And I don't mean to bash the Christian religion. I don't mean to bash the people who firmly believe in their Christ and the way of their faith. Creator. I don't see. I'm not against any faith, any religion. And our way of worship should also be accepted, but it has been the most unaccepted of all of the religions, in my opinion. And when you see things like the KKK in Charlottesville or the KKK in Hull, I mean, we know that there's congressmen who are very strong supporters of the KKK, and yet I have yet to hear a church actually denounce them. Actually denounce that. No, we do not stand with the KKK. And if you're KKK, you stay out of our church. You're not welcome here. We're a church of peace, the Prince of Peace. Well, how could you have people come into your church? In Texas, they take guns. They're allowed to carry guns into their church. Well, what do you need a gun in your church for? When I go to Pipestone, Minnesota, the home of the sacred pipe, the Chinoopa, and what made it so special there is that before any tribe could go in to quarry for the pipe, to get the pipestone, to make the pipes, they left all their weapons outside. They left it outside of the area. It wasn't the weapons were not needed there, and that's why do you need a gun in a church? You have faith. If your faith is that strong, you don't have to worry about anything. Your faith will walk you through. But these people apparently have no faith, or have very little. What we heard at that meeting from those commissioners, what we heard from the people speaking in favor of the fountain, how many people said it's about money. What are we going to do with the donations if we don't accept this fountain to be restored? What are we going to do about all the donations? We've got to return them. We're going to lose our contributors. If those people were really honest and cared about the city, they wouldn't care about the money. The money was already a tax write-off. Big deal. And if they really care about the city, they will still continue to donate to the city, to the people. And instead, what's going to happen is they want to keep that fountain, and $1 million has to come out of the taxpayer dollars to have that fountain restored. The taxpayers have to restore a racist fountain out of their tax dollars that could actually go for, and this is a part that I haven't heard yet, is that before we started talking, your show was talking about the transgender march that was there, and before that march occurred, the police came in and they removed all the homeless. Some of the homeless they arrested. Isn't that a crime? If it's supposed to be open to all the public, why were the homeless arrested? Maybe they might have wanted to stick around and learn something, and that's a crime.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. Like the city commission meetings used to start at 6, and then they changed them to 7. And coincidentally, 7 o'clock is when a lot of the homeless shelters in Kalamazoo do their cutoff. So, yeah, the commission is a little skittish about hearing from the most marginalized folks in our community. And I would also like to mention, the last time they had a meeting to discuss this, the Fountain of the Pioneers, some of the commissioners who were more hemming and hawing and talking about both sides were a lot more receptive towards the removal of the fountain before we had those 25 people show up kind of waving their money, talking about I invested my money to get restored. One of the last people who spoke from the opposition was the president of the Gilmore Foundation. So it's quite plainly obvious that there's some big money influence going on here that is I believe it was you who said you keep hearing about how Kalamazoo is a progressive city. Well, when are they going to act on it? Apparently not when money is involved.
They're not progressive. They're regressive. And whenever I still expect to see that giant Ferris wheel in the middle of their park. That's what I expect to see. It's an amusement park now. If anyone goes drive around that park, walk around that park, and tell me if that isn't like the trashiest part of Kalamazoo today. They have candy canes that are half painted. They have trash everywhere. The leaves they haven't mowed or raked. If anyone had a yard in Kalamazoo, their private property, and if they don't rake their leaves, I believe they'd be fined. Yet in that park, they can have it look trash. All those monuments, they don't belong there, but they belong in a museum, or they should be put in the city hall in their lobby. And especially that plaque of Abraham Lincoln. What a disgrace! Right beside the mound, they have a plaque of Abraham Lincoln having spoke there. The guy who hung 38 chiefs plus 2. What a disgrace! I don't know how you can dishonor the Native people anymore.
Well, it's pretty.
I think. I think the churches should gather together. I think all the people gather together and voice your opinion to these commissioners, that Historical Preservation Committee. That's a complete farce. They think they're so arrogant, and they think they know so much, but they know very little. Dr. James Onivasio, the best archaeologist in the world, he made a statement. He said, before an exploration that he did in Pennsylvania called Meadowcroft, he said, before we did this exploration, we thought we knew so much about archaeology. And he said, after this, we found we know nothing at all. And that's where we all stand, and that's what we should all do, is humble ourselves and say, you know what, we really don't know half as much as what we think we know.
Well, that's definitely true. And, it's interesting how, so many of those people were there talking about education, and they're certainly not educated enough to know about the conflict of having that sign right next to the mound. That's something that I always thought of, too. I don't want to keep you too much longer, Eugene. I mean, we've been talking for the better part of the hour now. I think one of the big things that I did want to hit on, while I got you on the line here, is excuse me. We've seen movements like this, all over the state. There's been push legislation to get that sports name banned, and like I said, people have been defending this statue around this idea that it's somehow noble as a piece of art. It creates discussion. They cite, and it's we have a similar struggle. Paw, they have the R Skins name, and we've done protests there, and from what I see, their line of argument is not that much different than all of those people who are, going up and defending the fountain. It's just, they might use some loftier language and words, but it still boils down to kind of heritage and, preserving local history and that whole line. So, what would you say to these people who keep harping on their heritage, which is racist and colonialistic in nature, and how can we heal? How can they do the kind of education that they seem to be so concerned about? How can they do that in a real way that actually does help Indigenous folks?
It's like learn, but understand that when you're doing the reading, like that Commissioner Anderson had spoke that he read books, but I have a feeling he was reading books from far back, and those far back books were really anything that was any books that were written had to first go to England, because that's where they had to be published. And when they were published, before they could be published in England, they had to be edited. So none of the books are going to that were edited are going to be really telling the truth as far as being against England. The Queen or the King, they would never allow that. But when you look and you think about Pawpaw, the Redskins, or when you see tomorrow with their big game for the Washington Redskins, and that name is deplorable. And let me explain quickly why that's so deplorable. Because there was a bounty. The government had put a bounty on the native people. They put a bounty of $200 on the men, $100 on the women, and $50 on the children. And so they would skin the people. They would actually take their hides off of them. They would skin them, roll the hides up, and they would send them to England. And those hides were then used to be wallpaper in England and lampshades. And they're still there today. And that's why I feel about that. The commissioner in the city hall, if they believe that because it's all a part of genocide. It's all a part of the genocide. And if they believe that that fountain is so great, then what they should also do, if they want to really teach, start lining their walls with the hides that they could get from over in England that came from our people. What a disgrace. And for the owner of the Washington NFL football team to think that's proper, for the high school in Pawpaw to actually think that they're teaching the children proper by saying it's okay to be called a Pawpaw Redskin, it's deplorable. And they should, and the teachers and the administration should be held accountable, and they should be made to understand the true meaning of respect for culture. I mean, how many white people are actually treated in the same way? How many Christians are treated the same way? We're always treated the very worst, and that's why we are today the smallest minority, but we're the most loving of all. And that's why we are the smallest minority. When it came to Thanksgiving, for the Pilgrims, when they came, and we came out, and we came with our gifts and our bounties, handing it to them. And by the end of the day, after they were done feasting, they murdered everyone. And then the next day, the people who were still left came with their arms out, with gifts and more bounty, and they were taken again and again murdered. And that's the way we've always been. Murder us, and we still come out and we love. Murder my family, and what happens? I go in the morning and I stand at a tree and I face the sun and I give thanks for everything. I give thanks for the sun coming up and our heat and our light, being able to see colors. But I also give love. I pray love for those who murder our families. And that's where we stand with that. Instead of praying hate, I pray love. And how can we do any better than that? That's what we're taught. And that's what and I just hope that your listeners can hear and contact these commissioners and say, look, that is a sacred site. That's a sacred site. That's not a place of play. You do anything in that sacred site that you would do in any cemetery in Kalamazoo. They would not have a playground put on a cemetery, and I heard someone saying that they want to put a playground there, a teaching tool. What are the teaching tools in a cemetery? You have tombstones and graves. They said the mound is nothing because there's nothing there. How many graves do they dig in a cemetery just to have empty? They don't have any empty graves. They all have something in. And how many graves could we actually go to and say, gee, I'd like to dig that up and see what's in there. We should learn about that culture. We are the only species on Earth that actually digs up the dead. It's horrendous. We've got to be better than this. We must be better. And I know I've taken a lot of time, and I'm sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. We definitely wanted you on the show, and especially this before the auspicious date tomorrow. We really wanted, I'm really glad that you were able to join us last minute. Because this is exactly what we wanted to talk about on the show, and you lend a wonderful and powerful voice to that, and I think it is my hope, at least. I feel like we're on the precipice, and from what I've seen at Standing Rock, the way of love and the spirit, that's what's going to lead humans out of this darkness. If we do find our way out, that's what it's going to be. And again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and for coming out to Kalamazoo to stand with us against that statue. I would ask, do you have any kind of parting comments before we bring the show to a close?
I do. Minnie Waconey, water is life.
Minnie Waconey, yeah. Well, miigwech, my friend, and hopefully I will see you again later. Hopefully I'll see you again under better circumstances when we're not having to tell the white colonizers that they're being racist. So, all right.
This is excellent circumstances. This is the way to teach. We don't need a racist statue to learn from. We need to listen to each other, and that's the best way to learn. And I say Minnie Waconey, and I also say Che miigwech to you and everyone, and Bama P Minawa Kawabaman.
All right, miigwech.
See you later.
Yeah, see you later. Miigwech to you, and again, thank you so much for coming on the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. That again, that was our guest, and he is a incredible indigenous activist. Also does a lot of research and advocacy for indigenous burial mounds and historical education. So. Again, thank y'all for tuning into the show. If you're doing holiday get together tomorrow, just be mindful of what the history of that holiday actually is. I know I have a lot of friends who are fasting, some are withholding, some, including myself. I do appreciate the time that I get to spend with family, but I do ask that we are all mindful of where the root of this day off and this chance to gather and feast, where it comes from. So please be mindful of that tomorrow, as you may or may not be eating with your families, and keep in mind the struggle does continue. One of the things that I've brought up time and time again at the commission is, this is a living history. This is not something that is in the past, and even talking about the recent past. When Eugene is talking about being part of AIM and how they were considered a terrorist group. Even more recently, Standing Rock, Tiger Swan, the mercenary group that was hired out to run surveillance and kind of oppressive police tactics on us, referred to the water protectors as violent jihadists, and basically used that kind of military language when they described and talked about us, and particularly the indigenous folks. So, Native folks face the highest poverty rate of any non-white group in this nation. Indigenous folks living on reservations have a 39% poverty rate. I will repeat, 39%. And for indigenous folks who don't live on reservations, that number is 26%. So, my biggest takeaway, with this whole statue thing, it needs to be, these people, these original people of this continent, they cannot be continued to be ignored, because the atrocities that they have experienced, they're still experiencing them. They face a degree of police violence that is equivalent and sometimes exceeds those that happens to our black brothers and sisters. And when we go into the future, and I really do believe this sense of community, the sense of respect towards the earth, as I experienced at Standing Rock, as many of these indigenous folks practice every day. That is what is going to dig us out of this horrible, I was about to curse, poop pit that we find ourselves in as a species. So, yeah, as Eugene said, listen. We all need to listen. Anyway, y'all, have a good night. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. You can find us on Facebook, Hoodrat Strategist radio program. We have all of our episodes uploaded onto YouTube. And you can join us every week, Wednesday from 5 to 7. Everybody, Manny Wachoni, keep fighting for that revolution solution.